Most people think a toll booth is just concrete and cash. They're wrong. Welcome to Cypress Bend Toll Plaza, a place adrift between the Blackwater Forest and the Whispering Reed Marsh, where the highway isn't just asphalt, it's a boundary. My name is Liam Thorne, but they call me Trace. I came here seeking silence, a place where the screams in my head might finally fade. Instead, I found myself living by 3 strange rules just to survive the night. What's the loneliest road you've ever traveled? Tell me in the comments below. And if you're ready to pay the price of admission, subscribe to Night Creepypasta Rules and ring that bell. Because out here, the cost of passage is higher than you think. The shift begins now. The $20 bill looked ordinary enough, crisp despite its journey from some unseen driver's hand to mine. Then my thumb, even through the thin latex of my issued gloves, brushed against them. 3 parallel gouges, deep and sharp, raked across Andrew Jackson's stoic face. They weren't tears. They felt deliberate. Instinctively, I pressed harder. A single, viscous droplet of crimson, impossibly dark and thick, welled up from the ragged edge of the longest gash, staining the olive green of the bill. Then, the stark white of my glove. It pulsed once, like a dying heartbeat. Rule number 1's Trace. Clara Dubois. Voice. A low, almost mournful whisper from the shadowed corner of the toll booth. Cut through the humid South Carolina night. Never let them touch your skin. And never, ever put that kind in the till. Her silhouette, framed against the sickly yellow glow of the single security light, was reed thin. Her face obscured. Trace. Liam Thorne, actually. But Tracy was what stuck. A bitter souvenir from the Ironwood Blaze 5 years back. The one that had claimed my best friend Finn and left me with a lattice work of scars hidden beneath my uniform shirt and a permanent, aching hollowness where my nerve endings used to be. Henry Cho, ex-forest ranger, now graveyard shift toll collector at Cypress Bend Toll Plaza. A concrete island adrift in a sea of whispering reeds and ancient moss-draped cypress trees, where Highway 17 became a thin, forgotten ribbon, disappearing into thin, forgotten ribbon disappearing. Black Maw, the Blackwater National Forest on one side, and the equally inscrutable Whispering Reed Marsh on the other. I'd come here seeking silence, a place where the screams in my memory might finally fade. I was beginning to suspect I'd found something far more sinister. What the hell is this? I stammered, holding the bleeding bill gingerly between thumb and forefinger. The metallic, coppery scent of it filling the cramped booth, overriding the usual smells of exhaust fumes and stale coffee. Clara didn't answer directly. She glided from her corner, her movements unnervingly fluid, and produced a small, tarnished brass box from beneath the counter. She gestured with her chin. I dropped the offending 20 into it. She snapped it shut, the click unnervingly final. The forest has its collector's Trace, she said, her voice still a near whisper, her eyes large and dark in the gloom, fixed on the brass box. And the marsh has its mimics. You're just here to manage the exchange. She handed me a laminated card, the edges worn smooth. 3 typed rules. Simple, stark, utterly insane. Don't take bills with claw marks. They bleed. If the forest howls at midnight, dim the booth. When the marsh shadows mimic your walk, don't move. They're stealing you. My first night, and already, rule number 1. The car that had passed the bleeding bill. An ancient rust-pocked sedan, with no plates and windows so heavily tinted I couldn't see the driver, had accelerated with a guttural roar, unheard from such a derelict vehicle, vanishing into the Blackwater's depths. As its taillights disappeared, a gust of impossibly cold air swept through the open toll window, carrying with it a faint, musky, predatory scent. And from deep within the forest, I heard a low, guttural growl, not of any animal I recognized, but something satisfied. Clara just sighed, a sound like dry leaves skittering across pavement. It's pleased with the offering, or displeased with the rejection. Hard to tell sometimes. She glanced at me. A flicker of something. Pity? Understanding? In her dark eyes. Survive the night, Trace? That's your only job description here. Later, as the pre-dawn mist began to rise from the whispering reed marsh, painting the world in shades of gray and silver, an old pickup truck, its bed laden with strange bundled roots and what looked like Spanish moss, rattled to a stop. The driver was an elderly Gullah man, his skin like polished mahogany, his eyes unnervingly perceptive. Elijah Baptista, according to the faded sign on his truck's door. Elis Roots and Remedies. He paid his toll with ordinary coins, but his gaze lingered on me. New blood at the Cypress Bend. He rumbled, his voice like stones shifting in a riverbed. The woods be hungry tonight, son. And the marsh, she be a jealous sister. He tapped the side of his nose. You listen to the little missy now. He nodded towards Clara, who was watching from the shadows. She knows the rhythm of this place. Some rhythms best not be broken. With a final searching look, he rumbled off, his truck's engine a surprisingly healthy counterpoint to its dilapidated appearance. As the sun finally broke, painting the cypress trees in hues of blood, orange, and gold, Clara locked the brass box containing the bleeding 20 into a heavy steel safe beneath the counter. A safe that looked far older and more secure than anything else in the dilapidated booth. It wasn't angry then, I asked, the unease still a cold knot in my stomach. Clara shook her head, her expression unreadable. It got a taste. That's all that matters. For now, she looked out at the forest, then at the marsh. Around here, Trace, everything pays a toll, one way or another. And I knew, with a certainty that went bone deep, that my search for quiet anthounds had just become a desperate fight for survival. The nights at Cypress Bend Toll Plaza quickly descended into a disquieting rhythm of near-total silence, punctuated by moments of inexplicable, bowel-loosening terror. The highway itself was a ghost road after 10 p.m., save for the occasional bleary-eyed trucker or lost tourist who'd clearly taken a very wrong turn. Most of my companions were the unseen denizens of the Blackwater National Forest and the Whispering Reed Marsh. The air itself hummed with their presence. The scent of pine needles and damp earth from the forest was a constant, but often it would be overridden by that other sharper smell, iron and decay, the coppery signature of something old and predatory. From the marsh came the humid, sulfurous breath of stagnant water and rotting vegetation, and sometimes a cloying sweet perfume that reminded me, with a sickening lurch, of funeral parlors. My interactions with Clara Dubois were a delicate dance of professionally enforced distance and shared, unspoken dread. She was a wraith of a girl, moving with a quiet, almost preternatural grace, her dark eyes rarely meeting mine directly, but always seeming to watch, to assess. We'd exchange minimal words during shift changes or coffee breaks, her conversation usually revolving around the mundane. Inventory counts, weather reports, yet always with an undercurrent, a silent acknowledgement of the other rules that governed acknowledgement of the other rules. This place, the Harrison kid, before you, she'd said once, staring out at the impenetrable wall of trees that was the Blackwater. He thought the rules were a joke. Lasted 2 weeks. They found his car a mile down the service road, empty, keys in the ignition, radio still playing. She didn't elaborate on who they were. She didn't need to. The forest howled for the first time on a night clotted with a thick, oppressive humidity, the air so heavy it felt like breathing soup. Exactly at midnight, as the digital clock on the wall flipped over with a soft click, it began. Not the call of a wolf, or a coyote, or any creature I, with my years as a ranger, could identify. This was a chorus, a symphony of howls, rising from the deepest, blackest heart of the Blackwater. It was a sound of primal hunger, of ancient, untamed savagery, laced with an almost human-sounding grief. It clawed at my ears, vibrated in my chest, and brought back, with paralyzing clarity, the memory of Finn's last, agonized scream as the ironwood blaze had consumed him. My breath seized. Every nerve, ending, screamed. The lights. "Trace!" Clara's voice, sharp, urgent, cutting through my paralysis. I fumbled for the dimmer switch on the main console, my hands slick with sweat. She was already there, her small hand quickly, expertly, sliding it down, plunging the interior of the toll booth into a near-total darkness, save for the ghostly green glow of the transaction monitor. "Stay down and stay quiet," she hissed, her voice barely audible above the unholy chorus from the woods. We huddled in the oppressive gloom, the only light the baleful, distant glow of the highway lamps. Outside, the howling intensified, seeming to circle the small concrete bunker of our booth. I could feel it, a physical pressure against the walls, the hungry, sniffing curiosity of unseen muzzles, the weight of countless ancient eyes fixed upon us. The coppery scent of blood and decay was overpowering. I fought back the urge to retch, the memory of Finn's charred. Then, as suddenly as it began, the chorus ceased. A final, drawn-out, mournful cry, and then silence. A silence so profound it was almost as terrifying as the howling. After a long, agonizing 10 minutes, Clara slowly raised the dimmer. The world outside looked unchanged, yet different. The shadows beneath the trees seemed deeper, more menacing. The air felt colder. What was that? I finally managed, my voice a hoarse whisper. "The old ones," Clara said, her voice flat, her eyes still fixed on the tree line. "The forest remembers them, and sometimes it lets them sing. They don't like bright lights when they're feasting." The next morning, Warden Alistair Finch, the Blackwater's chief ranger, paid an unscheduled visit. He was a broad, weathered man, his face like a topographical map of sun and worry. He claimed to be checking on reports of unusual noise activity, but his gaze, sharp and suspicious, lingered on me. Then, on the mended section of fence near the forest edge that hadn't been mended the day before. "You new here, son?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. "This stretch of road, it's got a history. That's not to add to it." He didn't say more, but his unasked questions hung heavy in the air. That night, as I began my rounds, I found it near the forest-facing window of the booth, a window far too high for any normal animal to reach. A single, muddy paw print, impossibly large, with claws that could shred steel, and beside it, almost as an afterthought, a single perfect oak leaf, as black as polished jet. The old ones had come calling, and they had left a message. The memory of the ironwood blaze of Finn's horrific end became a relentless, unwelcome companion. The nights at Cypress Bend seemed to pry open the sealed compartments of my mind, replaying those last fiery moments with a cruel, high-def precision. The smell of smoke, even the phantom scent from some passing trucker's cigarette, would send me into a cold sweat. And the dark, whispering expanse of the whispering reed marsh began to feel like an extension of that inferno, a place where things were lost and never found. Elijah Baptiste became a more frequent, if still enigmatic, presence. He'd stop by the booth, not always to pay a toll, but sometimes just to sit for a few minutes on the worn wooden bench outside, smoking his hand-rolled cigarettes and sharing cryptic pronouncements. He'd leave small gifts for Clara, bundles of dried herbs that smelled of sage and something else, something wild and peppery, intricately carved wooden charms depicting egrets and alligators. The Marsh, she'd be a tricky woman, son, Eli said to me one misty evening, his eyes like polished obsidian, reflecting the distant gas flares of some far-off refinery. She likes to wear other folks' faces, especially the faces of them what's lost. Them what's still calling out from the mud. He looked directly at me then, a knowing sadness in his gaze that made my skin crawl. You got a powerful sorrow in you, Trace Thorne. A powerful echo. Be careful. It don't call out to the wrong kind of kin in that their reed break. His words were a chilling prophecy. The third rule made its terrifying debut on a night an electric storm had knocked out most of the highway lights, leaving the stretch around Cypress Bend plunged into an almost palpable darkness. The only illumination came from the low, flickering emergency lamps within the booth and the distant, baleful glow of a single malfunctioning traffic signal down the road, casting long, dancing shadows. I'd stepped out of the booth for a moment to stretch my legs, the air thick with the pre-rain smell of ozone and dawn. As I walked a short distance along the cracked asphalt shoulder, a movement in the corner of my eye caught my attention. My shadow, cast by the distant, flickering traffic light, was wrong. It wasn't just lagging or distorted by the uneven ground. It was moving independently. As I took a step, it took two, its limbs elongating, its head tilting at an unnatural angle. I froze. It froze. Then, as I cautiously lifted my hand, the shadow hand moved a fraction of a second before mine, its fingers long and spidery, writhing in the dim light. When the Marsh shadows mimic your walk, don't move, they're stealing you. Panic, cold and absolute, seized me. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to break free from this horrifying, silent puppetry. But Clara's rule, Eli's warning, they held me rooted to the spot. I stood there, rigid. My breath, a ragged, shallow gasp, watching as my shadow doppelganger began to detach itself from my feet. It wasn't just a two-dimensional silhouette anymore. It seemed to gain a horrifying, three-dimensional substance, a deeper blackness within the surrounding gloom. It took a hesitant, jerky step towards the whispering reed marsh, then another, its movements a grotesque parody of my own gait. I could feel something, a pulling sensation, not physical but deeper, in the core of my being, a cold, draining emptiness, as if a vital part of me, a memory, a piece of my very essence, was being siphoned away with each step the shadow took. I thought of Finn, of the way his laughter used to sound, of the shared dream we'd had of starting our own wilderness guide service. Those memories suddenly felt distant, faded, like old photographs left too long in the sun. The shadow reached the edge of the marsh, its form already indistinct, merging with the deeper darkness amongst the rustling reeds. It paused, and for a terrifying instant, I thought it turned its featureless head back towards me, as if in a silent, knowing farewell. Then it was gone, swallowed by the mists and the night. The pulling sensation ceased. I swayed, a wave of profound weakness and disorientation washing over me. I stumbled back into the booth, my legs like lead, my mind a jumble of fragmented thoughts and a terrifying new blankness where vibrant memories had once resided. Clara was there, her face unusually pale even for her. She didn't ask what happened. She just pressed a steaming tin mug of Eli's potent, peppery herb tea into my trembling hands. It takes a piece. Sometimes, she whispered, her dark eyes troubled. A memory, a feeling. Whatever you're holding on to too tight. She looked out at the marsh, a flicker of something unreadable. Fear, resignation in her gaze. But the marsh, it always wants more. It's never satisfied with just a taste. The next morning, as I looked at my reflection in the cracked mirror of the booth's tiny restroom, I saw it. A single, small, almost imperceptible patch of gray, like a dusting of ash, in the vibrant auburn of my hair. just above my temple. It hadn't been there yesterday. The Marsh mimic had taken more than just a memory. It had taken a little piece of my time. The theft by the Marsh mimic left me shaken, adrift. It wasn't just the physical weakness, the mental fog that now clung to me like the humid bio air. It was the insidious sense of loss. Memories of Finn, once sharp and poignant, were now blurred at Theges. Names of places we'd explored together eluded me, the sound of his laughter a fading echo. The hungry verdure of Blackwater and the slough kin of Whispering Reed were not just abstract threats. They were actively, personally consuming me. Clara and Eli became my unwilling and often cryptic lifelines. Eli would leave small pouches of pungent, protective herbs by the toll booth window, or intricate charms woven from sweet grass and palmetto fronds, muttering about shoring up the spirit and keeping the hungry shadows from finding the cracks. Clara, though still reticent, began to share more, fragments of her family's long, cursed history as keepers of the Cypress Bend toll. It's not just a road, Trace, she'd said one gray dawn, her voice heavy with a weariness that belied her youth. It's a conduit, a vein, between their world and ours. She gestured vaguely towards the forest and the marsh. This booth, this toll, it's supposed to be a regulator, a point of exchange. But the old pacts, they're fraying. The collectors are getting greedier, and the mimics are learning to take more than just shadows. Her motivation became clearer, not malice, but a desperate, inherited duty to maintain a fragile, almost impossible truce. She was afraid, I realized, terrified of what would happen if that truce finally, irrevocably, broke. She feared that a grand toll was approaching, one that would demand far more than bleeding bills or forgotten memories. Warden Alistair Finch, meanwhile, escalated his scrutiny. His patrols around the toll booth became more frequent, his questions sharper. He'd found things in the Blackwater, animal carcasses drained of blood, their hides bearing those same distinctive three-pronged claw marks, patches of forest where the vegetation had withered and died overnight, as if leached of all life. He'd even recovered a discarded blood-stained glove near a remote trail. My glove, from that first night with the Bleeding 20. Something's using this forest as its private larder, Thorne, Finch had said, his eyes hard, pinning me with their suspicion. He clearly thought I, or Clara, or both of us, were involved in something illegal, something gruesome, poaching perhaps, or worse. He didn't believe in spirits or shadow mimics. He believed in evidence, and the evidence was pointing, however circumstantially, towards Cypress Bend. He mentioned installing covert surveillance, bringing in a K9 unit. The noose of the mundane world was tightening, even as the supernatural one threatened to swallow me whole. Desperate, I started my own investigation, poring over old county maps and archived local newspapers during my daylight hours, when the Nook's terrors were at a lower ebb. I found a faded, leather-bound ledger in a locked drawer beneath the main toll console, a record kept by previous night wardens. It was a chilling chronicle of escalating dread. Entries spoke of Kel'ama, currency in increasing denominations, of the forest's Howl growing hungrier, more demanding each year, of shadows that didn't just mimic, but sometimes spoke with stolen voices. One entry, dated almost a year prior to my arrival, written in a spidery, desperate scrawl, made my blood run cold. CD says the toll is due. The big one. She says the forest needs a new heart, and the marsh a new reflection. She says only a soul already scarred, already claimed in part, will satisfy them both. She looks at me like I'm meat. CD, Clara Dubois. My breath hitched. Clara wasn't just a keeper. She was a preparer, a selector. The mini-hook that slammed home the horrifying truth was an older entry, almost illegible, from decades past, written by a warden whose name was smudged beyond recognition. The girl is not the keeper. The girl is the toll itself, renewed each generation. She only delays her own payment by finding another. Do not trust the quiet one, ever, Clara. The quiet one. Was she not just maintaining a truce, but actively, desperately, seeking a replacement for herself in this infernal exchange? Was I being groomed? My spirit systematically weakened, my memories leached, to become the next heart of the forest, the next reflection for the marsh, the kindness, the shared dread, the herb tea. Had it all been a carefully orchestrated deception, a tenderizing of the lamb before the slaughter? The upcoming winter solstice, the longest night of the year, suddenly loomed not as a date on a calendar, but as a horrifying, rapidly approaching deadline. The week leading up to the winter solstice was a descent into a maelstrom of heightened paranormal activity and mounting, suffocating dread. The forest didn't just howl at midnight anymore. Its guttural, multi-voiced roars echoed at random, unsettling intervals, each cry seeming to scrape away another layer of my sanity. Chaos with claw-marked bills became a nightly occurrence. The phantom drivers within now almost palpable, their unseen eyes burning into me as I robotically placed their tainted currency into the brass box. The marsh mimics grew bolder, their shadowy forms no longer content to merely echo my movements from a distance, but sometimes appearing pressed against the toll booth windows, their featureless faces silently mouthing my name, their presence leeching, warmth and memory with every passing second. My physical and mental state deteriorated rapidly. The patch of gray in my hair had spread, a creeping frost overtaking the auburn. Memories of Finn, of my life before Ironwood, were now like shattered chimchays, their sharp edges cutting me, their substance increasingly lost. I was becoming a ghost of myself, a hollowed-out vessel being prepared for something. Clara Dubois, too, seemed to be unraveling, though in a different, more terrifying way. Her usual quiet reserve was replaced by a feverish, almost desperate intensity. Her eyes, usually pools of shadowed sorrow, now held a strange, almost predatory glint. She'd begun her own rituals around the toll booth, chanting in a low, sibilant language I didn't recognize, arranging strange patterns of stones and feathers. Her movements an unnerving blend of ancient rite and modern anxiety. The ledger entry, "The girl is not the keeper, the girl is the toll itself," renewed each generation, screamed in my mind. Eli Baptist, bless his ancient, knowing soul, was my only anchor. He visited daily, his face etched with a deep, sorrowful concern. He brought stronger herbs, more potent charms, but even he seemed to acknowledge the growing hopelessness of my situation. "The longest night approaches, son," he'd rumbled, his voice heavy. "The old ones of the wood and the deep shadows of the reed. They demand their due. The balance must be struck. She is trying to redirect the debt." He looked at Clara, then back at me, his meaning chillingly clear. Warden Finch, true to his word, had escalated his own investigation. I'd seen his men and Araya count traps appearing on trees, motion sensors hidden in the undergrowth. He was closing in, but I knew with a sickening certainty that whatever mundane justice he sought would be too little too late. The true trial was to be held in a court far older, with far more terrifying stakes. The night of the winter solstice arrived, cloaked in an unnatural, oppressive stillness. The usual cacophony of the swamp and forest was hushed, as if the very land held its breath. The air was thick, heavy, saturated with the mingled scents of pine, marsh gas, and that ever-present, sickeningly sweet odor of blood and decay. The perfume of the cypress Ben Toll. Clara met me at the start of my shift, not in her usual worn jeans and hoodie, but in a simple, almost ceremonial white dress that seemed to shimmer faintly in the dim light of the booth. Her dark hair was unbound, cascading around her pale face. The look in her eyes was no longer just weary or sad. It was something ancient, implacable, and terrifyingly devoid of human pity. "Tonight, Trace," she said, her voice a low, resonant hum, no longer a whisper, but a declaration. "Tonight, the toll is paid. The pathways will be cleared. The balance restored." "Balance, Clara?" I managed my voice a dry croak. "Or are you just trading one life for another? Your life for mine?" The words from the old ledger, the accusation, hung unspoken between us. A flicker of something. Pain? Regret? Crossed her face. So fleeting I almost missed it. Then it was gone, replaced by that chilling, serene composure. "It is the way of the pass, Liam Thorne. Always has been. One warden falls, another rises. One soul anchors the hungry verger, another placates the slothkin. It is not personal. It is necessary." She gestured towards the forest. A midnight howl began. Not a chorus this time, but a single, impossibly deep, resonant roar that shook the very foundations of the toll booth. Simultaneously, from the marsh, the shadows began to writhe, to coalesce, no longer just mimicking, but forming. Tall, slender figures of pure, roiling blackness, their edges indistinct, their presence a vortex of cold. "They hunger," Clara whispered, her eyes glowing with a faint internal light that mirrored the predatory gleam I'd seen in the other creatures of this place. "And you, Trace, with your scars, your guilt, your fractured spirit, you are a feast." She raised her hands, and a low, guttural chant began to issue from her lips, the same sibilant language I'd heard her use before. The air in the booth crackled with an unseen energy. The brass box containing the claw-marked bills began to glow with a faint, angry red light. The shadows from the marsh glided closer, their featureless faces turned towards me. From the forest, I could hear the heavy, crashing tread of something immense, something ancient, approaching. This was it, the sacrifice, my sacrifice. But then, from the highway, headlights, not the phantom pulses of a ghostly car, but the steady, determined beams of several official vehicles. Warden Finch and a GT Woodcraft of armed rangers, an array of them. "Clara Dubois! Clara Dubois!" Finch's voice boomed through a megaphone, cutting through Clara's chant. "This is Warden Alistair Finch of the Blackwater National Forest Service. You are surrounded. Release Liam Thorne. Cease your activities immediately." Clara faltered, her chant breaking. The red glow from the brass box dimmed. The forest entity paused in its approach. The marsh shadows hesitated. For a glorious, fleeting moment, I thought Finch had saved me. Then Clara laughed, a cold, brittle sound, devoid of all humor. "Fools," she hissed, her eyes blazing with an inhuman fury. "You think your mundane laws hold any sway here? You think your bullets can stop the ancient hunger?" She turned her gaze back to me, and the power in it was terrifying. "The toll will be paid, Warden. One way or another." She raised her hands again, but this time, her chant was different, sharper, more desperate, and it wasn't directed at me, or the forest, or the marsh. It was directed inwards, at herself. The white dress she wore began to darken, as if stained from within by an unseen ichor. Her skin grew paler, almost translucent. The faint light that had glowed in her eyes intensified, then began to pulse, erratically, like a dying star. The shadows from the marsh, instead of advancing on me, recoiled. Then, with a collective sighing rush, they flowed towards Clara, enfolding her, merging with her. The great entity from the forest, which had been a palpable, menacing presence at the edge of the tree line, let out a roar not of hunger, but of frustration, or perhaps cheated anticipation. "Clara," What are you doing? I yelled, a new, horrified understanding dawning. The pact requires a warden, she gasped, her voice now weak, strained, her form flickering, becoming insubstantial, part shadow, part girl. A life for the pass, my line, has always paid, but I choose my own quittance, the GLD state GT. Claws, marks on her hands, which I now saw for the first time, began to bleed, not crimson, but a dark, shimmering, ichor-like. She was the bleeding bill. She was the scarred offering. Eli Baptiste suddenly appeared at Finch's side, having seemingly materialized from the swamp mists. "Hold your fire, Ranger," he commanded, his voice imbued with an ancient authority. "She ain't your enemy now. She be." Untangling the knot, paying the oldest debt of all, Clara, now almost entirely a creature of shadow and sorrowful light, looked at me one last time. A single perfect tear, black as obsidian, traced a path down her ephemeral cheek. "The rules. Trace," she whispered, her voice a fading echo. "They were never for your survival. They were for mine. To delay this." And then, with a final silent implosion of shadow and light, she was gone. The forest entity let out a long, mournful howl, then slowly retreated into the depths of the black water. The remaining marsh shadows dissolved back into the reeds. The red glow from the brass box faded completely. Warden Finch and his men stood in stunned silence. Eli Baptiste bowed his head, a silent prayer on his lips. I was alive, untouched, but the price, the terrible, self-sacrificing price Clara Dubois had paid, hung heavy in the pre-dawn air, a taste of ash and sorrow on my tongue. The Warden of Cypress Bend had finally, truly paid her toll. The aftermath of Clara's self-immolation, for that was the only word that seemed to fit her terrifying sacrificial dissolution, was a quiet, stunned chaos. Warden Finch, a man clearly accustomed to the rational, predictable violence of nature, was left grappling with a reality that defied every protocol in his ranger's manual. His men, their faces pale and drawn, moved with a hesitant uncertainty, their weapons suddenly feeling useless against an enemy they couldn't see or understand. Eli Baptiste was the only one who seemed to comprehend the enormity of what had transpired. "She done broke the oldest chain, son," he said to me, his voice heavy with a mixture of sorrow and a profound, ancient respect. "The Dubois women. They've been tethered to this pass, to the hungering verdure and the slough-kin, since before the white man set foot on this soil. Each generation, a daughter given to the silence, to appease the old ones, to keep the road open, yet contained. She chose a different path, a harder one. There was no body to recover. Where Clara had stood, there was only a faint, circular scorch mark on the concrete of the toll booth floor, and a lingering, almost imperceptible scent of burnt herbs and something indefinably ancient. The brass box containing the claw-marked bills was now cold and inert, its contents just ordinary, if strangely stained, currency. The rules, Clara's rules, now felt like epitaphs. Finch, after a long, tense debrief with Eli and me, a debrief that skirted the full, horrifying truth, focusing instead on Clara's unstable mental state and delusional ritualistic behavior, culminating in a tragic, unexplained disappearance, officially closed Cypress Bend Toll Plaza. The highway it served was rerouted further inland, the old stretch of road declared unsafe due to geological instability and unpredictable marshland encroachment. The official story was neat, tidy, and utterly false. I stayed on for a few more days, helping Eli perform what he called the rites of quieting around the abandoned toll booth and the edges of the black water and whispering reed. These were simple, solemn rituals. The scattering of sacred herbs, the chanting of old gullah prayers, the pouring of offerings of sweet water and honey into the earth. It wasn't an exorcism, Eli explained, for the spirits of this place could not be exorcised. It was an act of respect, of acknowledgement, a plea for a new, more peaceful balance now that the old, blood-soaked pact was broken. During those days, a strange calm settled over Cypress Bend. The forest seemed to sigh rather than howl. The marsh mists felt less menacing, more contemplative. The oppressive, predatory atmosphere lifted, replaced by a profound, almost melancholic quiet. The hungry verdure and the slough-kin, it seemed, were in mourning, or perhaps simply waiting, assessing. The peace of my spirit, the memories the marsh mimic had stolen, did not return. The gray patch in my hair remained. I was permanently marked by my time at the toll booth, a living testament to its strange, terrible power. But the constant, gnawing fear, the feeling of being slowly consumed, had lessened. Clara's sacrifice had bought more than just her own quittance. It had bought me a reprieve, a fragile, uncertain peace. Dr. Finch eventually cleared me of any wrongdoing, though his eyes, whenever they met mine, held a new, profound unease, a dawning understanding that there were forces in his beloved forest, far older and more dangerous than any wildfire or poacher. He spoke of requesting extended leave, of needing time to reevaluate. The last time I saw Eli Baptiste, he pressed a small, smooth, dark stone into my hand. From the heart of the cypress deep, son, he said. It remembers the true names of things. Keep it close. The road ahead for you, it ain't gonna be straight. And the old ones, they got long memories. Years drifted by like mist over the whispering reed. I left South Carolina, putting as much distance as I could between myself and the haunted stretch of Highway 17. The nightmares of the Ironwood Blaze still came, but they were different now, tinged less with guilt and more with a strange, almost reverent awe for the terrible, untamed power of nature, and of things that wore nature's mask. Finn's memory, though still carrying a familiar ache, was no longer a source of self-flagellation, but a quiet reminder of courage and sacrifice, qualities I had witnessed firsthand in the most unexpected of places, in the most tragic of ways. I found work on a remote fire lookout tower in the Bitterroot Mountains of Montana. The solitude was profound, but it was a clean solitude, a silence filled with the honest sounds of wind and wilderness, not the pregnant, watchful quiet of Cypress Bend. My scarred hands, once adept at wielding chainsaws and Pulaskis, now found a new purpose in the meticulous observation of weather patterns, the careful mapping of fire risks. I was still a warden, in a way, but of a different, more tangible kind of wilderness. Yet, the cypress toll never truly left me. The gray patch in my hair remained, a permanent memento. The smooth, dark stone Eli had given me never left my pocket, its cool weight a constant, grounding presence. And sometimes, late at night, with only the sigh of the wind in the pines for company, I would feel it. A faint, almost subliminal thrum in the air, a flicker at the edge of my vision, a fleeting scent of swamp lilies, and decay where none should be. The pathways Clara had spoken of, they weren't just confined to that one forsaken stretch of road. They were everywhere, hidden just beneath the skin of the world. One blustery evening, a low-pressure system moving in, I was scanning the horizon with my binoculars. Far below, on a seldom-used logging road that snaked through the valley, I saw a pair of headlights. They stopped, then began to pulse. A rhythmic, familiar thump, thump, thump. My blood ran cold. It couldn't be. Not here. I kept watching, a cold dread creeping up my spine. The pulsing stopped. For a long moment, nothing. Then, a figure emerged from the driver's side, barely visible in the failing light. Tall, slender, moving with an unnerving, fluid grace. My heart hammered against my ribs. It looked like Clara, or an echo of her. The figure stood by the car for a moment, then turned and seemed to look directly up at my distant tower. And then it raised a hand, not in a wave, but in a gesture that felt both like a summons and a benediction. Was it truly her, somehow reborn, or another warden bound to a new, terrible pact? Or was it merely a trick of the fading light, a projection of my own haunted memory? I didn't know. And perhaps I didn't want to. The figure got back into the car, and the headlights, no longer pulsing, switched on, steady and bright. The car pulled away, disappearing around a bend in the logging road. But as it went, I saw something glint on its dashboard, something small and metallic, reflecting the last rays of the dying sun. It looked, from this distance, very much like a small, tarnished brass box, the balance Clara had sacrificed herself for. It was a fleeting thing. The old ones of the wood, the deep shadows of the reed, their hunger was eternal, and the toll, the true toll for passage through the liminal spaces of the world, it was never truly paid in full. It was merely deferred, passed on, a debt that would always find a new collector on some forgotten highway, under a watchful, uncaring moon, and I, Trace Thorne, would forever be listening for the whispers in the static, for the howls in the midnight forest, a warden of a different kind, forever marked by the shadow of the Cypress Toll, the rules of Cypress Bend. They're written in shadow and blood. Liam Thorne learned that the hard way. The forest hungers and the marsh mimics. Clara Dubois paid a terrible price to break the chain. But the toll is never truly settled. Seriously, if you didn't stay until the very end, you missed the final, chilling glimpse of the price of passage. The twist at the close will leave you questioning everything. What do you think the hungry verger and the slough-kin are? What was Clara's true burden? Share your theories in the comments below. And if you made it through the night shift at Cypress Bend, if the road hasn't claimed you, then you're already part of our collection. Subscribe to Night Creepypasta Rules, because some highways lead to places you never wanted to find. And the toll, it's always due.